This is a 40-year-old with no job to go to this morning, and the story people assume explains it is almost always wrong. No inheritance, no lottery ticket, no startup sold for millions. What actually explains a scene like this is a specific, repeatable, and entirely learnable set of financial mechanics, started years earlier and followed with real consistency. Today, we take that mechanism apart completely because retiring at 40 is not a fantasy reserved for the lucky. It is math, applied early with a small number of deliberate choices behind it. The financial independence retire early movement, commonly shortened to FIRE, has produced a large and growing body of real data on exactly how this is done at ordinary income levels by ordinary people. It is not about being rich in the traditional sense. It is about reaching a specific, calculable number early enough that working for a paycheck becomes optional rather than mandatory. I went through the research on safe withdrawal rates, savings rate to timeline modeling, and the real account trajectories of people who reached financial independence in their 30s and 40s for this one. What I found is a small number of levers that, used together and started early, turn an ordinary income into an exit date. Let's build it. Retiring early has a specific, calculable definition, and it starts with a widely cited rule from retirement research. A portfolio can typically sustain a withdrawal rate of around 4% per year, adjusted for inflation, without running out over a long retirement horizon. Working backward from that rate, the number required to retire is roughly 25 times your annual expenses. Retiring at 40 is not a vague aspiration. It is reaching that specific number invested before your 40th birthday, and nothing more mysterious than that. This definition matters because it reveals something counterintuitive. The target itself is not fixed. It is a direct multiple of your annual spending, which means every reduction in ongoing expenses does two things at once. It frees up more money to invest today, and it permanently lowers the total number required to retire. This single relationship is the foundation for almost everything else in this video. There are 6 primary levers that determine how early a person reaches financial independence, and every documented early retirement case ultimately comes down to some combination of these 6, applied with real consistency over a meaningful stretch of years. None of them require a lottery-sized income. All of them require actually pulling the lever, not just knowing it exists. Lever 1. The savings rate controls the timeline, not the income. The single most important number in the entire FIRE framework is the savings rate, the percentage of take-home income invested rather than spent. Because of how the 25 times expenses target and compound growth interact, the relationship between savings rate and years to retirement is dramatically nonlinear. A 10% savings rate can take well over 50 years to reach financial independence. A 50% savings rate can reach the same destination in roughly 17. The income level matters far less than most people assume. The percentage kept and invested is what actually controls the calendar. This is why 2 people earning meaningfully different salaries can retire in the same year, and 2 people earning the identical salary can retire a full decade apart. The variable doing the real work has never been the size of the paycheck. It has always been the gap between that paycheck and what gets spent, held wide, and invested year after year. Lever 2. Expense reduction compounds twice. Because the FI number is calculated as a multiple of annual expenses, reducing spending has a double effect that most budgeting advice never fully explains. First, it frees up more income to invest, directly increasing the savings rate from lever 1. Second, It permanently shrinks the total number required to retire, since a smaller annual expense figure produces a smaller 25 times target. A single recurring expense cut works on both sides of the equation simultaneously, which is why disciplined expense reduction tends to move the retirement date far more than an equivalent increase in income alone. This does not mean deprivation is the strategy. It means permanent reductions in recurring costs, housing, transportation, and lifestyle scale in particular, carry outsized weight in this specific calculation because they compress the target and expand the fuel supply at the exact same time.
Lever 3. Low-cost, broad market investing as the growth engine. A high savings rate only builds financial independence if the money saved is actually invested somewhere that grows, rather than sitting uninvested in cash. Low-cost, broad market index investing has become the standard engine behind most documented early retirement trajectories because it captures long-run growth without the higher fees or concentration risk of actively managed alternatives. The specific fund selection matters far less than the simple fact of being invested consistently for the full stretch of years the plan requires. This lever is less about finding an exceptional investment and more about removing the temptation to wait for a better entry point, a market dip, or a more exciting opportunity. The engine only compounds during the years it is actually running, and every year spent in cash instead of invested is a year the compounding never gets to work. Lever 4. Multiple passive income streams beyond pure withdrawal. Living on passive income is often pictured as one clean number arising from a single source, but in most real early retirement plans, it's a blend. Dividend income from the invested portfolio, rental income from real estate for those who hold it, interest from bonds or cash instruments, and the portfolio withdrawal itself. Diversifying across a few of these sources reduces how much any single stream needs to carry, and it reduces the damage from a downturn in any one asset class at the exact moment income is needed to live on. This lever is less about maximizing any single stream and more about resilience. A plan built entirely around one withdrawal mechanism is more fragile than one that can lean on a second or third source in a year when markets or a particular asset class underperform.
Lever 5. Tax sequencing and account strategy. Which account type a dollar is invested in and later withdrawn from has a meaningful effect on how much of it is actually usable. A thoughtful sequence, capturing any available employer match first, using tax-advantaged accounts for their intended benefit, and building a taxable brokerage account specifically to bridge the years before certain retirement accounts become penalty-free, can materially reduce the tax drag on the entire plan, both during the accumulation years and during retirement itself. This lever will not move the retirement date as dramatically as the savings rate itself. But over a multi-decade horizon, the difference between an efficient and an inefficient account sequence compounds into a substantial gap, simply from taxes never taken versus taxes paid unnecessarily along the way. Lever 6. The Coast and Barista Bridge. Full financial independence at 40 is not the only version of this outcome, and treating it as all or nothing causes many people to overwork years past the point where meaningful relief was already available. Once a portfolio reaches a strong enough midpoint, compound growth alone can carry it to the full number over the following years, even without further contributions, a strategy often called coast fire. Pairing that with lighter, part-time, lower-stress work that simply covers current living expenses, sometimes called barista fire, allows a genuine reduction in work intensity years before the full number is reached. This lever reframes the entire timeline. The full retirement number is still the ultimate target, but a well-funded midpoint can unlock a meaningfully lighter version of working life
years before that final number is reached, which is often the actual outcome people are after when they say they want to retire early. Underneath all 6 levers, there's a trap that the FIRE community itself has documented extensively, often from painful firsthand experience. Reaching financial independence answers the money question completely and answers almost nothing about how to actually spend the decades of unscheduled time that follow. A meaningful share of people who retire early report an unexpected identity and purpose gap in the months after. The structure, social connection, and sense of contribution that a job provided, even when they were eager to leave, does not automatically get replaced just because the withdrawal number checks out. This is not an argument against early retirement. It is an argument for planning the purpose side of the equation with the same seriousness as the financial side, deciding well before the number is reached what the actual days are going to be built around. Skipping this step is the most commonly reported regret among people who otherwise executed the financial plan flawlessly. Let's run the actual numbers. Someone starting at age 23, earning a moderate, unremarkable income, who commits to investing 50% of their take-home pay in a low-cost, broad market portfolio and holds that rate consistently, crosses the 25 times expenses threshold in roughly 17 years, landing financial independence right around age 40. This is not a projection built on exceptional market timing or a rare windfall. It is the ordinary result of the historical average market return applied to a genuinely high, sustained savings rate over that specific stretch of years. This is the calculation that gets lost in the retire at 40 headlines, which tend to emphasize the outcome without ever showing the input. The input is not luck. It is a savings rate roughly 5 times higher than a typical household's, held consistently for close to 2 decades, invested in a simple, low-cost engine, and left alone to compound. The math is available to anyone willing to run the same inputs for the same stretch of years. Understanding the levers is the easy part. Here is the specific sequence of actions that actually turns the framework into a real timeline. Total your real annual expenses, honestly, and multiply by 25. This is the concrete target the rest of the plan is built around, and most people significantly overestimate or underestimate it until they actually run the calculation. Pick a savings rate that is honest about the timeline you actually want, not a comfortable default. If a 40-year retirement date matters to you, the rate needs to reflect that ambition, often somewhere between 40 and 50% of take-home income, held consistently, not adjusted downward the first time it feels difficult.
Set up automatic contributions directly into a low-cost, broad market index fund so the money invested from lever 1 never sits idle in cash waiting for a better moment. The engine only compounds while it is actually running. Prioritize permanent reductions in the largest recurring costs, housing and transportation especially, over smaller daily cuts, since these carry the double effect from lever 2. More fuel to invest, and a smaller target to reach. Before the number is reached, actually decide what the unscheduled time is going to be built around. A project, a form of work done by choice rather than necessity, a community, a purpose. Treat this planning as seriously as the investment plan itself, because it is the piece most early retirees report wishing they had done sooner. Here is the reframe I want to leave you with. Retiring at 40 was never a fantasy reserved for people who got lucky. It is the ordinary output of a high savings rate, a low-cost investing engine, a shrinking expense target, a diversified set of passive income streams, an efficient tax sequence, and, for those not quite ready to fully stop, a coast and bridge strategy that delivers real relief years before the final number is reached. None of it requires a windfall. All of it requires starting the 17-year clock earlier than most people ever consider. That does not mean the path is easy or that it fits every income or every life circumstance without adjustment. It means the mechanism is fully knowable, fully calculable, and available to be started this month at whatever age you are reading this. The only ingredient this plan cannot manufacture for you is the years it needs to run. Everything else is a decision you can make today.